There we go. Hello, everybody. I had the wrong camera set up there. We should be good to go. I've got all my supplies set up by my side. Today we're doing a simpler project, and we should be able to do all the die cutting to get through our project today. I guess I should say hello and welcome. My name is Misty. This is Crafty Soup. This particular live stream is my Advent All Year series, where I use the Spellbinders Crafty Advent Calendar from last December, and I use it to create other projects, usually that weren't necessarily intended to be created using these dies. I use the dies and I mix them up in different ways. I see different shapes and I recreate different imagery using these dies. It's something that my brain likes to do, to come up with ways to use these outside of the box. So that is what the plan is for today. Normally I have a bit of homework for everybody to do, die cutting wise, to craft along with me, although a lot of my viewers have said they usually enjoy watching and then crafting later. But today is very much a craft along as we go because it is a simpler card. Next month we'll have a lot more die cutting, which means there will be a lot more homework. So enjoy the easier card this time around. I know my usual viewer who is here on a regular basis is not here today, so she'll catch me on the replay. So hello, you know who you are. So yeah, I think we'll go ahead and dive in since it's usually quiet around here, and a lot of people choose to watch on the replay, so thank you for being here on replay. I will switch over to my desktop. I guess one other thing I should say, if you are brand new here and you found me by accident, I do have a 20-minute minimum on the commenting, and that is just to keep those trolls out because I am here all by myself and it's sometimes hard to monitor the comments, especially when if a troll gets really active, it can be hard for me to switch focus and take care of that. So you have to be subscribed for at least 20 minutes, and if you don't want to be subscribed anymore after that, no hard feelings, just unsubscribe and go on your way. And if you do want to subscribe and leave me some comments, that is perfectly okay. All right, today's card is this one. So the Advent calendar came with this lovely mushroom stamp set, which is really sweet. I really like mushrooms. And honestly, I haven't really done a lot with that stamp set. And here again, it's just kind of ending up in the background. But because I love the mushrooms and I really like the dimension of die cuts, I wanted to figure out a way to kind of amp this imagery up a little bit. And so I figured out how to make two different styles of little mushrooms, or little and big mushrooms. So that is the project for today. We are going to start with some ink blending because there isn't a lot going on. Using ink blending around kind of helps draw the focus in. It's that vignette style that you see on old-fashioned photographs, and we can accomplish that with ink. So that is where we are going to start. So I've got my panel. I have a smaller blending brush. I would typically use a bigger blending brush for that, but this is what I found. So this is what we're going to use today. And I typically use all Concord and Ninth inks, and I think my cardstock is a combo of Concord and Ninth and Spellbinders. So I've got my wheat ink from C9, and that is what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this both for highlighting images, for doing my ink blended background, and for stamping those mushrooms. So it's going to do all those jobs. I like to start in the corners when my ink is at full saturation because that is going to give me the most, what is the word I'm looking for? The most intensity for that vignetting. You want it to be kind of on the outside corners. So I definitely like to start in the corners and work my way in And then I'm going to lighten it. I mean, it will naturally lighten up as you move in a direction because you're running out of ink on your brush. So I use that to my advantage when I am going down the side of the paper. And then I will repeat that process on this corner. And it does create very, some people would say harsh, very noticeable lines. And if you don't like that, just tap off extra ink before you bring it to your paper. I will get that going down the sides. And then I'm just going to do a little bit here at the bottom. It doesn't need a lot just because we're going to end up covering up a lot of it with the grass. So I just try to bring it up a little bit to above where I think the grass might be. And really, you could skip this if you want to because it really is super subtle behind all that grass. But it's an option if you want to. All right, I'm going to try and smooth out some of these harsher lines up here just a little bit. It will dry back on its own a little bit and naturally smooth out some, but I notice I did get a bit of a harsh line there. So I'll see if I can incorporate a little more ink into kind of the lighter areas, and that will help even things out. If I go above that harsh line a little bit and then start blending under that harsh line a little bit, that'll help pull it all together. Okay, and then because I had ink on the edge and I tipped my brush too much, it left these little marks. So you know what I'm going to do? We have two sides to our paper. We can go again, and this time I will just go a little bit faster because now you know the basics. And you probably already knew the basics anyway, but talking about the vignette specifically technique helps draw the eye into the focal of your card. So I will just redo this, and I will skip the bottom this time since we don't really need to worry about that too much, and the subtlety is there on my example. Okay. See if I don't get too enthusiastic as I do this last pass. I should be, nope, see, nope, I did it again. So knowing your brushes, knowing the pressure that you need, and kind of knowing their quirks is a little helpful when you're ink blending. I'm not going to worry about that too much. At this point, what I might do, no, I'm not going to. I was thinking about adding some purposefully rough marks down at the bottom to kind of help make those look purposeful. But I think I'm just going to leave it as is. And sometimes our work just isn't perfect. And I tried. But at some point, you just gotta let it be. And definitely working slower is helpful to that. Let's see how it's smoothed out on the other side. No, it's still pretty rough. All right, so I've got my card base that I'm going to set aside here. Let's get to die cutting. So I'm going to need some red from my mushroom. I've got some white from my mushroom stem, and we are going to age that back a little bit so it's not stark white and give it more of that creamy brownness that mushrooms have. And then I've got green for my grass. In terms of dyes, we are going to use this guy, which was from the little alien spaceship, and these were the beams to beam up a cow or whatever from the alien spaceship. We've got this dye, which is the inner piece from the fishbowl set, We are going to cut this out of red and out of white, and you'll see how we use the white piece to get the second layer to our mushroom. And then this was again from the alien spaceship. This is the piece where just the little antenna layers behind the actual spaceship, but we're going to use the whole entire piece to make another mushroom. I've got my stamp set, and then I really wanted to use the worm for both mushrooms as the stem, but the length and the curve was not the right proportions for the larger mushroom. I did, however, get it on this smaller mushroom, and there you can see those impressions that the die leaves behind, and I really like those impressions. We're going to talk about how to get something along those lines even if you can't use this die for the stem of your bigger mushroom. What I did use for the stem of the bigger mushroom was the outer horseshoe layer from the very last die set in that advent calendar, and we're going to make our big stem. All right, let me go ahead and set up my die plate, because I can get a lot of these dies on here all at the same time. I've got pieces of tape to hold things in place. I'm going to maximize the space on my die plate by trimming off the excess so that we can fit lots on here at once. And we'll get that taped in place. We'll get this taped in place. We need our horseshoe. We don't really need the whole horseshoe, so you can do just half of it if you have a scrap that you would like to use up and not worry about wasting paper. So I will do that over here with just half. I am out of tape, so let me grab a little bit of fresh tape. I love this tape, but it is just a little too tacky straight out of the gate, so I always de-tack it a little bit on the back of my hand. And then we need our green. I'm going to cut off the excess and then just cut a strip, because we're going to be cutting multiples of these to be our grass, and I will definitely show you how to do that grass as we go. It may have been the very first video I did in this series, but I had another grass technique. If you want to go back and watch it, I have a whole playlist of these videos, and it is the one where we made little critters out of various parts and pieces. I think there was a cat and a dog and a bunny. So we had various critters peeking out from behind a flower pot, and I made some grass using a different die for that one. So you can check that out if you want another idea for grass besides this one. We do need a bit of this worm to be the stem for our smaller mushroom, and this is a great, you can like add in as many mushrooms as you want to this scene. You can make your mushrooms different colors, have rainbow mushrooms, have more natural looking mushrooms. It is up to you. I went with the very classic red and white mushrooms here because I liked the intense contrast with the red. Get some of that out of the way. All right, so this is the first pass of the die set, and see, moving my horseshoe off to the side left room for that worm. And I know my die is hanging over the edge, but my die machine is wide enough to accommodate that. And if your die machine can't handle that, be careful about not damaging your machine or your dies and making sure everything is tucked behind. we've got the first little mushroom, and yes, we will need to cut off that little antenna piece, but there's mushroom cap number 1. Here's mushroom cap number 2, and then we're done with the red. Here is stem number 1 for our big mushroom. Let me see if I can show you guys a little bit better. And we're done with that. Here is stem number 2 for our little mushroom. And yes, we will trim that down, and we're done with that. What I did not say about this particular die, which I should mention, is that you don't want to put it all the way off the edge of your paper, because what happens is it falls apart and it makes it harder to use. So don't do what I did. We need to do a partial die cutting technique with this one. And I honestly forgot before I ran everything through. So let's start that one again and do that partial die cutting technique. I'm trying to figure out if there's anything else I need. We've got the mushrooms, it's just this grass. Okay, so we can put all of the other dies away, and I will set aside the excess tape to use another time. Okay, going back to this partial die cutting technique. I need to keep it going this way because I need my plates to be partially on the die and partially off the edge of the die. And it doesn't matter which direction you go. I'm going to go both directions so I get the most use out of my paper. So I'm going to start with this direction. I do want to tape that upper edge down. I do not want to go off the edge of the die because otherwise it will just cut strips again. Instead, I want to bring my plates just slightly behind where the curve of the die starts its corner into the length of the die. And I'm going to put that plate right on top, stick my second plate on top. And my die cut machine is electronic, so I have to kind of hold it in place until the machine senses it and is able to pull it through. So I have to very carefully hold that in place so it doesn't slip and slide and move on me. In this case, manual machines are actually a little bit easier for this technique. Oh, I just felt it shift. So let's double check. Yep, it shifted on me. So I just rotated my plate because I can feel it bowing a little bit, and that makes it harder for me to hang on to it. So if I make it a little tighter of a grip for my hands, then I can control it a little bit better. Okay, we'll see how that goes. Sometimes on my machine I don't have good success because I have to kind of hold it very steadily to push it into the machine before the rollers catch up. But this time it worked just fine, and you can see that we have these pieces still attached, and that's going to come in really handy for the next step of the grass. So we're going to do this 4 times all together, and as I go, I am going to again make sure that the edge of my die isn't going off the edge of the paper. I want to rotate it so I can bump it right up next to the previous piece without going over, and that will get the maximum amount of pieces cut from this piece of paper. I do have a little slit in my paper, so I want to avoid cutting into that just because I don't want it to mess up where I'm trying to hold everything together. So we'll see if that works. And again, I like to make sure this is way at the top of my plate so that I have the most space as I push this into my machine. And my cutting plate is bowing this way. So again, I'm going to try and set myself up for the most success on my particular machine and try and get this to work on the first pass. And once I feel like I have it, oop, that moved on me. Once I feel like I have it lined up, then I can try and pinch it here and pinch it here and hold it in place as I feed it in. Okay. And I'm pretty sure that did a good job. So there's pass number 2. I'm going to rotate. And I could rotate the whole thing and just keep cutting from this side, but I found that I liked offsetting it for various reasons. So pass number 3. One more pass and then we'll be ready for the next step of the grass. Oops, rotate it this way, move the tape, and then line it up. So I'm curious, if you're watching on replay, how many of you do this partial die cutting technique. It was not something that I tried very much, and then once I moved to an electronic die cutting machine, then I decided I wanted to do it, and it's not as easy on this machine, but hey, we just do what we gotta do, right? All right, that should be all of the die cutting. So I'm going to take these apart, and what I want to do is we're going to not work with the free end. We're going to stick our scissors into this end and just kind of follow that and clip these out. But I want to leave these attached at this base because we are going to, from the tip to as far as you think you need to go, we are going to cut little strands to create our grass. And I'm just kind of stopping where the die naturally stopped at the base. And from this direction, where we're starting at the narrow tip, I cut about 2 or 3 times. So that's 1, and that's 2. I could try and get a 3rd one in there, but that's really not necessary. So we've got 1 and 2, that's fine. So then on this one, we've got the wide free ends and the narrow connected ends. So I'm going to clip that off. And it's still connected down here, and that's going to help us maneuver and glue this in place. So now, because we have a wide end, we can get more cuts into this one. So 1, 2, 3 cuts, and you do want to be careful not to cut across where they're coming together at the bottom. 1, and because this one came too far over, I'm going to end this clip just a little bit higher so it doesn't cut all the way through, and then we'll do that because a lot of this we're not going to end up using. We just use it as a handle to help us maneuver everything. So 1, 2, and 3. All right, these ones I will go a little bit faster with. You can even cut them all out and stack them up together and do them all at the same time. That could save time, but really it's not too hard. Right? The hardest part is just being careful to make sure you don't cut off these little strips that we're creating. And if you have fringe scissors, you could totally just use fringe scissors instead of this. But if you don't have fringe scissors, then this is an option for making your own grass and being able to glue it in place without having to worry about all these tiny, tiny strips of grass. Okay. Now, if we just left them like that, they are very straight and blunt across the top, and it doesn't look quite as natural. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim it just a little bit with a bit of an undulating curve. So I might start up, head down, and then come back up so that all of my pieces are slightly different lengths. And I am going to do all of these. Oops, I started cutting a little too far down on that one, but that's okay. We have some room to adjust. And see, this one you can definitely see the curve to it from the die, so that doesn't really look all that natural. So I'm just gonna give it a bit more of a wonk so that it looks a little more like grass and not like we repurposed another die. I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee here because my throat is getting dry, which is always the problem on a live stream. Okay, so we've got our background, and when we glue these on, we're gonna glue them quite a bit off, and that's gonna give us more of a consistent look across the grass, where you're not going to see this thick band that isn't striated like the blades of grass. So we will get to that in a moment, but first we need to do our stamping. So okay, we are done with our die. And get that out of the way. I think we're done with that blending brush. Get that out of the way. Done with that. Just clean up a little bit here so that it's easier for you to see what I'm doing. Send all of that out of the way. All right, I need a stamping block for my set. This is not the one I used last time. Oh, you know what? I did. I did set the right size aside for today. Go ahead and get that on there. So what I did was I offset my stamping so that it didn't look like two of exactly the same thing right next to each other. And that will actually give me a little bit of a nook to nestle this big mushroom in. So I'm going to start this first stamp kind of where this tallest peak of the stamp is, and that is going to go off the edge of my project. I am stamping up a little bit from the bottom to leave room for that grass to overlap, and we can adjust the length of grass to match our mushroom. It's harder to match our stamping to a specific length of grass. So let's line that up with the edge. I'm coming up maybe 1/2 inch from the bottom. Give that a stamp. And then I'm going to stamp the other side, and I'm going to butt the imagery of the stamp just right up near where that first image is. And it should just about naturally overlap the edge, and that, again, that makes it look more organic and less very tight and controlled. So that's our stamping. And so you can see this nook that I mentioned that's going to leave space for our mushroom so that the design works well together to fill in that gap. Okay, what I forgot to do was die cut my second mushroom piece because that's what I'm about to work on. So let's go ahead and run that through the die. If you're watching on replay, you might be saying, hey, you forgot back in the beginning, but no big deal. We'll just get it going on. My poor old man cat has decided it's dinner time and now he's sitting and meowing at the door, so hopefully he doesn't get too fussy. Otherwise I might need to get up and let him out because it is not dinner time yet, despite what he thinks, since cats cannot read clocks. All right. If you stick around with me long enough, you'll know that I'm fairly clumsy and I drop things all the time. This time I'm going to drop it on purpose. This is my favorite way to release die cuts from the die themselves, is to just drop it on a hard surface. And I find that dropping it with the die cut facing up actually does a better job. So there we go. We've got our die. Which brings us to a bit of a technique. So I am going to bring out my scoring tool. My scoring tool is built into my paper trimmer. You may have a separate scoring tool and that would make it a little bit easier. But either way, one thing that we're going to do is score some texture onto this piece. Excuse me, to make it look like the ridges in the underside of the mushroom. But trying to maneuver this piece, it's kind of small, my fingers are kind of big, scoring tool is kind of big, it can get a little unwieldy. So I take a sticky note and then on the sticky side, I'm going to line up the peaks of this die piece with the edge of the sticky note, and that's going to help keep it straight when I run it through my scoring tool of whatever kind that you have. With this in particular, I can just bump the edge of the sticky note up against the lip, and that will help keep everything straight. So I'm going to score this at 1/8 inch marks. That's going to get a little complicated because the 1/4 inch marks are usually the most prominent markings on your scoring tool. I don't know if most scoring tools even have 1/8 inch marks. So this trick that I'm going to show you should work for a scoring tool as well. And that is, I'm just going to start somewhere on my image and score. I want to be sure not to use the cutting blade. So I need to make sure that I'm using the scoring blade. And I'm just going to start scoring this first one. I'm going to be very gentle on the actual sticky note because that will just tear. Oh, hello, you made it. It's so good to see you. So yeah, I'm going to be careful scoring on the Post-it note itself because that can just tear and we want to keep that Post-it note intact. But we do want to score it a little bit because that's going to give us the technique we need. So I'm just going to score this up there and just a little bit on the Post-it note. And then I'm going to move that score line in between my actual scoring nook and the next 1/4 inch mark. And that's how we're going to get the 1/8 inch marks. So a little bit on the Post-it, rougher on our piece. Looks like I didn't come down far enough. I was trying not to tear that Post-it note. All right, and then I'm going to move that new fresh score line again in between the two lines. And if I keep going this way, we're going to get fairly consistent 1/8 inch score marks. And I did get a little rough with my Post-it, but because we don't have to worry about keeping that Post-it note, and this time I didn't score it at all, there we go. Because we don't have to worry about reusing that Post-it note, we don't have to worry about it too much if it tears. All right, and I'm just gonna keep going along. Oh, thank you so much. She was saying that she wanted to join in on the live stream and hang out with me today. So I appreciate that. It's good to see you here. I missed you last time around. Hope you're getting lots of crafty time in. Sounds like you were having a good time last time I talked to you. All right, gotta make sure I get my post-it note so that I can keep my lines a little consistent. It doesn't really matter too much if they're, off a little bit. But when I made my sample, they were off quite a bit, and then it didn't look quite right, and so just trying to make it look a little more like what I want. So when you have your scoring done, you have two sides. You have the side where the score line dips down, and then you have the side where it bumps up. I'm going to use the side that bumps up. And before we move on to that, we're also going to score our little stem, because I liked the texture of the stem that we got from the worm body, but I need the larger curve of using the horseshoe. So this one I'm just gonna kind of eyeball because it is a curve. There's not really a good way to get in measurements, so I'm just gonna kind of eyeball this one and keep curving it as I go. And really, this is optional. It's just that I liked that texture. It's not that it makes any sense to a mushroom or anything. It's just that when I was working with the wormy part, I just liked it. So I'm gonna do it. All right, and then a lot of that's gonna be hidden at the bottom, so that will be enough. And then again, you can decide, and you should decide this before you start scoring, but that dip versus the bump, you can figure out which side you want and then flip it over before you score it if you need to, because the bump side will be on the opposite side. So I'm going to just leave it like that. We are going to give these ones a little bit of inking, and I have a tiny blending brush. This one is from Pink Fresh Studio. I don't have a lot of these just because I was trying them. The handle is a little bit short for what I prefer, but the bristles are also shorter on these, which makes it a little easier to do this next step, and that is without too much ink on there. So I'm going to rub off a lot of that ink. I'm just going to very lightly, just barely kissing the ridge of that scoring line that we did, and that will kind of grab onto some of the ink and make the ridges darker than the dip in the ridge will be, and that will help them. I think they're called fins on mushrooms, now that I'm thinking about it. That will help them stand out a little bit more and look more mushroom-like. So that's what I'm going for. And this is hard to see on this camera. I have a manual zoom on my camera, so I could reach my big arm up into the screen and zoom in, but I'll just do this and hold it up to the camera. I'm going to go up a little ways because we are going to cut off some of this to give it a more natural shape. So I'm going to go up a little ways. And these holes may be in a bad position if they line up with the holes in the front of our mushroom, but that's okay. We can just cut off a little square of extra white if we need to, and we're going to layer this up with foam tape, so we'll have some wiggle room to play with that if we need to. And yeah, the cat is definitely wanting out, so give me a second. I'm going to let him out. What he doesn't realize is that just because I let him out doesn't mean he's gonna get dinner. He's gotta wait for that. All right, I'm gonna use the same brush, probably without re-inking too much, because I just want to get a little bit of that stark whiteness toned down so that it looks less artificial. And I'm going to do the inside curve as well. And for this one, I'm not worried about hitting the ridges. I'm just worried about getting the shadow on the outside of what would be a curve. And I do think I want just a little bit more ink. And this is super subtle, but it's one of those small details that I think makes a difference. Okay, now let's see. What do you think? You can definitely see the inking on those ridges. It's harder to show up on this piece, but it's there. I can tell that it's there. All right, are we ready for assembly? We do need to trim this little guy and ink this little guy. Just gonna trim that off, and I think with the curve, I think I cut it off at this one little impression that's in the die. And then we need to cut off our little spaceship antenna, and now we've got a mushroom top and foam dots. Here they are. I am going to glue just the edges of these down, but before I do, I want to add a bit of foam inside, and that foam will help push it up in the middle and create a natural roundness to the project. I am not going to take off this upper protective coat because I still want to be able to manipulate my stem in there, and I don't want it to be stuck down. Now when we line these up, if I push it up way too far, then you can see the back side of the mushroom would end too far in from the edges. So I want to pull these two so that it is almost exactly the same width across, but if I pull it too far down, then we're going to start these holes lining up with each other, and we'll have to cover that up. Let's go ahead and cover that up now. Let me grab this excess, and then we don't even have to worry about it, right? Little dots of glue around there. Let's see, did I cut my paper big enough? It's very, very close because I did not measure. I just eyeballed it, but I think I got it to work. All right. Now we can add that little smidgen of glue to just the edge, and some of this might stick out that we might need to trim off, so I want to keep the glue in just a little bit, and that gives an ever so subtle little pocket shape to our mushroom, which is creating more of a doming both this way, and the die creates the dome that way. And then we can just sneak our scissors under there and cut off that extra. Oh, what I also forgot to do was do a little ink blending on our mushroom. And I'm going to go ahead and go for it now. I'm going to keep my fingers on top of the white so I don't accidentally ink blend red onto the white of the mushroom. And I'm just going to pull on some ink. Yes, it is red ink on red cardstock, but it's going to add a naturally darker tone, which will give more of that shadow effect and create more of a domed look to the mushroom. So I'm just going to do the one side and pull it across. And then for our little guy, I will go ahead and do the opposite side because I'm choosing the sides that are leaning closer to the ground, and those are the sides that would have more of a shadow to them naturally. So I'm going to do this guy. And again, these are pretty subtle techniques, especially on camera, but in person, they make a nice little detail. I am going to try and keep my fingers clean if I can and get this ink cleaned up. We don't want to lose our stems. So hopefully you can see the difference in color between this side and this side. I feel like I can see it on my screen, so hopefully that's showing up okay for you. All right, now we have our 2 mushrooms and our little stem. Oh, we need to trim this first. So what I did was I just kind of gave it a little haircut just to make it less matchy-matchy with the top, because it feels like a Pokemon ball, if you know about Pokemon. So yeah, I just trimmed it off a little bit to do that. And I'm gonna tuck my mushroom up in there, but before I put my stem in, I'm gonna add another foam dot underneath my stem, because there's already one on the bottom here, way up there, but I don't think my stem's gonna reach the one I put in there. So I'm going to put one underneath, and then I'm going to go ahead and put one on top, and I'm going to put it up a little bit higher than I think I will stick my stem inside, so that way I try to keep it hidden under there when I stick this in here. Let's see, it might be running into that other one, so I will trim it if I need to. I can save that piece for my little mushroom. So yeah, it still feels like it's running into it too much. Let me see, maybe what I want to do is just kind of take this one back out without tearing my whole mushroom. Okay. I think that's going to be better. So I will use one on top and one on bottom of my stem instead of sticking it in the mushroom. And because it's a horseshoe shape, you have a little bit of a lip right here. I'm going to put it in just so that lip tucks right behind the edge of the mushroom, and we can find a good spot and then go ahead and adhere it in place. In, let that ridge show. It's about in the middle, and then I'm just going to give it a squish so it adheres. So there, we've got our little tilty mushroom. And then I think I forgot to ink this little guy. So let me grab my brown ink again. I really like to use my lid to make less mess, because I'm inking right on my mat. I'm still going to make some mess, but making a little less mess is nice. Okay, let's get this inked up. I'm going a little more heavy-handed with this one, partially because it's down low, kind of in the shadow of the bigger one, so it'll get a little more inking. Alright, I think you can see the detail on that one just a little bit better than was on the other one. Alright, we're going to use this little cut-off wedgie that we had left over behind this mushroom. Let's see which way. I think I made it go that way. So I think I will go ahead and stick that a little bit lower so that the foam actually catches my stem and I don't have to put extra glue on my stem. And again, you can see just the little subtle distance and shadow that it will give. We are ready to assemble this part. So I could put even more foam. I didn't do that on this one, but I will go ahead and do it on the live one. I'm going to add a little more foam to this project to give it even more dimension. And because this is going to be popped up on foam, we'll have to glue our stem down. But again, that gives more dimension. More. Okay. And I will sneak glue in there under that after I figure out where I want it to go. So that looks good. I'll sneak that glue under there. Just a tad. Okay, when I put my grass on, I want to hide this rectangle shape down here because that's the bottom of the horseshoe. So I want to make sure my grass goes up above that, which means I need to make sure my little mushroom isn't going to get buried in the grass. And it looks like I curved my mushroom the opposite way. Doesn't matter. Okay. I'm going to add just a little bit of glue behind where I have the foam and add glue on top of where the foam got covered, and then get my little guy there. Make sure I can hide the awkward curve down here of the stem. Okay, and here's where the handles of these are going to come in super helpful. I'm going to put a bead of glue on the bottom of my card front, and I want to make sure I go all the way to the very edge so that none of my little grass blades fall off. So bead of glue all the way to the very edge and just at the bottom, and I want good coverage so none of those grass blades go missing. I think when I started off on the edge, but I think for this one I'm going to go ahead and start in the middle so I know how high I need this one to go to make sure it covers up all of those awkward mushroom stemmy pieces. All right, and then I need to make sure I've got the opposite shape going this way so that they bump right up against each other. And I can even move this one down a little bit farther. They don't have to be the same height. And then another wide one. We'll finish off the edge over here. And you can see how my grass is undulating a little bit. That's fun. And then this piece over here. See, I didn't cut it because I started in the middle. I didn't get the alignment just right. But I can go ahead and cut another piece afterwards, or I might be able to repurpose, when I trim this, I might be able to repurpose this side to add over here. So the glue is still wet, but I'm going to go ahead and give this a go. I will try and trim this piece off, keeping that little bit of handle in place so that I can try and repurpose that one. Let's see if it works. And just follow the edge, and we'll take this piece, kind of repurpose it over here. Maybe I'm gonna fake it a little bit and spread it out a little bit. And we can even kind of spread these ones a little bit while the glue is still wet, and kind of fake it a little bit and make it look like it was a full bit of grass. All right, I want to give this grass a little bit of texture, but that glue is still wet, so I don't want to mess with it too much at this point. But once the glue dries, I just like to kind of ruffle up the edges with my fingernail, and we can kind of spread them out, move them around. Use that little ribbon curling technique with your fingernail just to kind of pinch and pull to give them a little more texture and dimension. So I will do that with this one once everything is 100% dry. But I don't want to do that right now because it will end up pulling my grass blades off. And then we are up to the sentiment, which really technically I should have done before I glued everything in place with all of that adhesive. But once again, I forgot. Luckily, if you're watching on replay, then you can do as I say and not as I do. Okay, our sentiment from the same mushroom set. I think they missed a very good opportunity with the puns here, because this one says thank you so much, and I changed it up to say thank you so mush, because we need a good pun. And I'm going to set that right there, and I'm going to stamp this with white ink, and I am just going to change up the lettering with a white gel pen. Let me grab, I think this is my juicy white ink pad. Let's see. Is that the dry one? No, it's working. And I am going to do this multiple times because it's hard to get a nice opaque white. And I find it's better to do multiple layers than trying to, squish it all on there, because not only does that distort the stamp, but it can tend to smudge things. So I'm going to do multiple layers of this white, and that's starting to get there. My tea is having a little bit of a hard time because of the dimension in my foam. Luckily it is foam, so it will squish down a little bit in my stamp positioner. Okay, I think that is looking pretty good. I will set that aside to clean up later. And we can pull this off. So there we go. It says, thank you so much. And I am just going to, I know I had it, there it is. Take a white gel pen, whatever your favorite is. I love the Uniball Signo because they are very opaque, and a lot of people get frustrated with them because they seem to dry out quickly. I haven't really had that problem, but I can definitely see the frustration in that. So I'm just going to drop my S, and maybe now is a time. Oh, you know what? I have an idea. I wonder if this zoom idea will work. I can, on my screen, I can pull, there we go. I can enlarge the actual video on my software so that we can zoom in. Aha! I figured out a workaround for my manual zoom. All right. So I am just going to create the bottom curve of an S off of that curve of the C. So here, let's use this Post-it note. So the C is this shape, and I'm just gonna go from the bottom of the C and make the rest of an S shape. So that is the plan here. And yes, the letter will hang over, but I think it's kind of cute seeing that it's been altered to change up the saying. So I think it's kind of cute that way. So there we go. Now it says, thank you so much. And we've got a very good pun going on. And then we can glue this down and we're done. We are really good on time today. I told you it would be an easier project. So Michelle, there's a lot of homework next time. Today was a lot easier, but I have got a lot of die cutting for next month's project, and I'm looking forward to next month too. So there we go. We have thank you so much. And I wonder if my glue is dry enough to start giving my grass more texture. There we go. That looks cuter. I love it. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up for tonight. That was a good one. Let me come on back over here and say thank you so much for being here, and it was good to see you, Michelle, over in the comments, and glad you could pop in, and hopefully you'll enjoy making this one later. Like I said, I'm looking forward to next month. It is a lot more die cutting, but I think it'll be a beautiful project. And then let's see, next month is August. For September, we're going to be working on a Halloween project so that we can have them ready in time for Halloween. And this is going to be, I think, my favorite project of the whole series. So I haven't done it yet to see if I can get it to work, but I've got my fingers crossed that I can get it to work, and I have a fun idea for September. So lots of good stuff coming up for the next couple of months, and I hope you will come back and join me again. And until I see you next time, I hope you have some artful days. Thank you so much for being here. Good night, Michelle. Nope, I'm in the wrong zone for shutting down the stream. I gotta get over here. Nope. There we go. Now I got it.